A few months ago, Gallup published a poll asking how Americans would rate their current life. On a scale of 0 to 10, what is your happiness and well-being level? Are you thriving? Are you struggling? Or are you suffering? What Gallup found was that last year, adults between the ages of 25 and 50 years old who were married were 15% more likely to be thriving than those who were unmarried. Doesn't mean that all people who were married were thriving, and it doesn't mean that unmarried people like myself and many of you are not happy. It's just that on average, adults who are married report being far happier than those in any other relationship status. Now, for those of you who are married, you may beg to differ from time to time, but this is good news for you and for marriage itself. Let's be honest, no marriage is perfect, no individual lifestyle is perfect. There will always be issues that come along no matter what. But these numbers in marriage, according to these statistics, should come as no surprise for us in the church. Why? Because marriage has always been incredibly important in the Bible. Think of the first story in the Bible, in the garden, when the man and the woman are joined together. Think of the last story in the Bible, the book of Revelation, and what takes place. It's a wedding feast. And then between all of that, in the scriptures, we see the image of God pursuing his bride and inviting her back into a relationship with him. And so that's the context of today's story, which is the wedding feast at Cana. So before we dive in, I have a question for all of you. If you were Jesus and you haven't yet made yourself public, you've been off to the margins, and you're going to pick your perfect opportunity to make yourself known, perform your first miracle, what would be your first miracle that you would do? Perhaps you might feed a few thousand people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. Or you might try and go and walk on water. Or you might just go for the gold and raise someone from the dead. Any one of those things would start off your public ministry with a bang, and people would see it and start believing in you. And yet, look at the first miracle of Jesus today. No one's sick, no one's possessed by demons, no one is starving, and no one is dead. Instead, Jesus' first miracle is to keep a wedding party going rather than shutting it down. Clearly, if this is Jesus' first miracle, he must have something deeper in mind. So we have to get a good idea of the situation for today. The Middle East in those days, unlike our American wedding parties, which only last a few hours, those weddings lasted a few days. It wasn't just 100 people that you invited to your wedding like we do. No, instead, weddings were the cultural festival of the town, and so the whole town comes out for your wedding. And the thing that kept the party going was the wine. As long as the wine was flowing freely, they didn't have any other drink, it was just wine. So as long as that was flowing freely, you had an excuse to keep partying. But if the wine ran out, and God forbid it ran out, then there was no more reason to party. You might as well say, everyone go home. And so that is the situation that we find ourselves in today. And so today we find Mary wanting to help this couple in a predicament, and so she presses her son Jesus for some type of solution to the problem. And so after Jesus goes through his exchange with his mother, has the servers fill these giant jars with water, scoop some out, bring it to the MC of the party, and the host is amazed at the quality of this wine. Because normally you serve the best wine first, and then when everyone is feeling good and can't tell what they're drinking next, you serve the $2 chuck. That was what you did. And yet the wine that Jesus produces today is not only fine wine, it's even better than the first wine that was served at this wedding. He takes the ordinary substance of water, what the people have put in, and he turns it into something that now gladdens their hearts, which is what Jesus does with us too. We contribute the ordinariness of our daily life, our ordinary marriage, our ordinary priesthood, our ordinary single life, our ordinary work, our ordinary family life, our ordinary school life. We contribute that, and God blesses it, changing it from the simple water it was into the precious wine it becomes. But there's a problem. The author Peter Kraft says that for many of us, we have reversed the miracle of Cana. We take the wine that Jesus has transformed and we turn it back into water. We make marriage boring. We make Jesus boring. We take the grace of God that has been poured into our hearts and we let it turn sour and into vinegar. And that's not what God intended. What did God intend? Let me give you an idea. In the Bible, there are about 250 references to wine all throughout the Bible. Most of them are pretty positive, some of them not so positive. But normally when we're referring to wine in the Bible, it's something good. As the Psalm says, wine cheers the heart. Therefore, the better the wine, the more it has to be savored. A little over a year ago, a group of us from the parish, some of you joined, we went on a pilgrimage to the Missions and Vineyards in California. And it's amazing what the process is that they make you go through when you're sipping wine. All you want to do is to start imbibing from that glass on the table in front of you, and they make you go through all these steps. They say, look at it, see the color, now hold it up to the light. Now look at the legs that come down to show the viscosity of the wine. Now give it a good swirl. Now take a sniff of it and let that, now take another sniff of it. Now purse your lips and take in a small sip of it. Swash it around in your mouth to get all of the flavors and aromas from that wine. While all you want to do is to just take it and start drinking it. Why? Because you don't shoot a good wine. That would be irresponsible. It has to be savored and enjoyed slowly. In the same way, the fine wine of marriage isn't meant to be put down like a cheap wine, because that's not what it is. The good wine of God's grace in all of our lives isn't meant to be just chucked out or left to go sour and turn into vinegar. And the wine that Jesus offers us is not to be turned back into water. It's to be treasured and it's to be enjoyed. That's how important today is, when Jesus turns the water into wine, making what is ordinary into something precious and special. But why does Jesus perform his first miracle at a wedding? What makes this event so special? Well, to understand this, you have to know who in the wedding has the responsibility for providing the wine. Whose responsibility was it? It was the groom's responsibility in any wedding in those days to make sure there was enough wine. Most of the brides that I work with in today's weddings, they would not give their groom that responsibility. All they have to do is get the suits. Everything else the bride takes care of. But back in those days, you were required, if you were the groom, to make sure there was enough wine. But when you understand that, the role of Jesus now makes so much more sense. Earlier in the gospel, John the Baptist, who was the precursor of Jesus, is baptizing, and Jesus had just come onto the scene. And his followers come up to him and say, hey, this Jesus who just showed up last week, he's getting more disciples than you. More people are following him. What's up with that? John the Baptist says, wait, don't worry. Because the one who has the bride is the bridegroom. The best man who stands and listens for him rejoices greatly at the bridegroom's voice. John the Baptist calls himself the best man. And who is the groom? It's Jesus. John the Baptist calls out for the groom, makes sure everything's ready for him, and prepares his way as he comes forward to meet his bride. Jesus, of course, is the groom. Then later in the gospel, Jesus is confronted by people who say, "How come the disciples of John the Baptist, they fast, they don't eat a lot, they don't drink, but your disciples, they all eat a lot and they drink a lot?" And Jesus responds, "How? Can the wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them?" The groom is with them. Therefore, they don't fast. Jesus is calling himself the groom. And so today, when Jesus is confronted by his mother in this predicament, it seems that he is looking straight past his mother and he's looking at that bride and that groom in this predicament. And he's thinking about not this wedding that he's at, he's thinking about his own wedding day, when he will be married to a bride, not to any earthly bride, not to a woman, but instead to his church, to all of us, when he gives his life for us. On any wedding day, when a bride and groom are standing right in front of me, they make these promises. "I promise to be faithful to you in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, to love you and to honor you all the days of my life. I promise to hand my life over to you and to hold nothing back." And that's precisely what Jesus is going to do. Those are the vows that he's going to make when he finally hands himself over to his bride, not at the base of the altar, but up there on the cross. That is his wedding day, when he will provide the true wine of his blood, which is to be received by all of us. And so when the priest up here holds up the consecrated bread and wine, which is turned into the body and blood of Christ, when the priest says, "Blessed are those called to the supper of the Lamb," it is Jesus who provides the wine of his blood that now is meant to cheer our heart. And so in the meantime, a couple years before Jesus will go to that cross, today, when this wedding groom is about to be embarrassed for not providing enough wine, the true groom comes onto the scene, and he provides wine to save the day. Jesus is basically saying, "This is my party, and I've come here to save the day for his couple because I will soon come to save humanity." And the best part is, it's not Jesus who gets the credit for today's sign and his miracle. No, when the head waiter, the MC of the party, tastes the wine, he's assuming it's coming from the groom. And so he says to the groom, "You have now saved the best for last." And the groom of this wedding gets credit for what Jesus has done. You and I get credit for what God has done in our life. We wouldn't be able to do anything without our Lord. And that's the best part for us. I get to do a lot of weddings, and in marriage prep, I normally meet with the couples about a half dozen times beforehand. The bride is always beautiful, but she's not nearly as beautiful as she will be on the day of her wedding, when she walks down the aisle, when she is fully ornate and has spent all those hours in the morning preparing. And the only one who gets the special view of her is the one standing right up here. I get to go through this all the time, but the one who's standing up front waiting for her, it's the only time basically that he's going to experience that. That's the groom, who stands up there excitedly awaiting as his bride walks down the aisle with a smile across his face because he sees how beautiful his bride is. Friends, the true groom for all of us is Jesus, who is up here at this altar waiting for you and me to process down, who is excited to see us. As our first reading from Isaiah says, "As a bridegroom rejoices in his bride, so shall your God rejoice in you." He rejoices in the fact that you and I are here. So when we come forward to receive communion today, we're participating in this wedding feast, not with our own individual spouse, but with the spouse of humanity. This Jesus, the true wine, which is his blood that has been given to us. So back to those statistics from the beginning. The wine of marriage gladdens the heart. And maybe that's why married people report, on average, a higher level of happiness. Question is, though, how do we make our marriages even stronger? How do each of us, even of those who are not married, embrace the invitation to now live our own vocation heroically? How do we do that? Well, let's not let the wine of our marriage turn sour. Let's not let the wine that cheers our heart be turned back into water by letting our life go boring. And let's not let Christ, who has offered us the true wine, go out the window. He has offered us his true wine because he is the true spouse of the church. So today, let's all approach this altar as a beautiful bride adorned to meet her husband. Amen.